Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our January meeting of the Pine Lily chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. Before Karina does a full introduction and goes over some plants, I wanted to, with some news from our chapter representative, Taylor Figueroa, that we had an election. We elected Karina for president, Taylor for chapter representative, Jim Moody for treasurer, Jennifer Adams for membership committee chair, and we are still looking to fill the newsletter editor, Publicity Committee Chair, Education Outreach Committee Chair, President-elect, and Secretary positions. So if you're interested in volunteering, please contact one of us. Karina, it's all you.
Hi, everyone. I just thought we would go over a few native plants for the month of January. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so the first plant is a native ground cover. It's a Gopher Apple, Mike Maschevich, and this is one of my favorite ground covers because it has a really dark green glossy leaf that looks really pretty in the distance, and it's got these little blooms on it. It's mainly found in scrub habitat, so it doesn't really like a lot of irrigation. It really survives on the natural rainfall. The fruits are up to about 1 inch long, and they're the favorite habitat food for the gopher tortoise, hence its common name, Gopher Apple. Now, this plant has underground rhizome. It's a pyrogenic plant, so it's meant to survive fires, and so it has a lot of underground rhizomes like a lot of pyrogenic plants, and this makes it spread pretty prolifically, and so you'll cover a really nice area if you have a big area to cover with a ground cover. This is a really good plant for that. Next, we have the resurrection fern. These grow on the tops of oak tree branches, really any tree. It prefers shade, and in the dry season, it kind of gets a glaucous blue color and kind of shrivels up a little bit, and it goes into like a dormant state. And as soon as the rains come, a little bit of moisture in the air, it miraculously resurrects and comes to life, and the fronds spread out and do their job. So it's a really beautiful fern, very feathery texture. For trees. And then the last plant we're going to go over is the Carolina Jessamine. This is one of my favorite vines. You can see the tubular yellow shape. They're very showy. This plant also prefers a little bit of shade. It'll grow straight up a tree or a fence or shrub, and it doesn't cover the tree and do damage like maybe some invasive vines do. It kind of just goes in a straight habit, and it goes to about 20 feet and a little bit tall, but it also spreads. You can also use this as a sprawling small ground cover, which looks good in that application as well. And it has just a slight sweet smell that pollinators like and are attracted to. So those are our 3 plants for this month, and I hope you'll join us as with our other events and speaker presentations. And now Valerie will do our presentation for this evening.
Yes, so I had the pleasure of recording Karina and Mike from Branch Management at the Big Tree Park in Seminole County a couple weeks ago, and so I filmed that and cut it, and so that is what I will stream now. Unfortunately, Mike is not here to answer your questions, but Karina, are you able to stay on?
Yes.
You don't have to, but if you are, either way, either I or both of us will be available to answer any questions that may come up at the end. All right, and I will stream that now. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Karina Vaudry, and I'm with the Pine Lily chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. And today we're talking to Mike Maschevich, who is the owner of Branch Management Tree Care. And he has been the owner of this company since 1983 and has been a certified arborist since 2001. And he completes hazard tree risk assessments, tree health evaluations, and pre-construction consultation. And what that means is he'll go onto a construction site and see what trees are viable for preservation and then help design a tree preservation plan for those trees. So, Mike, you had mentioned earlier that your uncle had some influence in your life to become an arborist.
Absolutely, absolutely. I started really dragging branches in '78. I was 12 years old.
Yeah,
It was my summer job. So first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And it's good to talk trees this morning. And we will touch on a few things today, but yes, my uncle had a lot of words of wisdom. We called them, Uncle Joe's euphemism on trees, whatnot. So one of the things when we talk trees, and I always look back on what he told me, was trees are typically trimmed for man's benefit, not for the trees. So if you leave the tree alone, it's out in the middle of the woods, do you really think a tree crew is going out there messing with it? No. There's a thick layer of broken branches, leaves, organic material that is giving back to these trees. Okay? And it's just growing on its own. In the urban setting, people are continuously picking that decayed material up. So then they're constantly looking at it thinking, well, what can we do to improve it? What can we do? Or this is bothering me or whatnot. And sometimes it's misguided. Sometimes it's very detrimental to the tree. And so what we want to do as arborists and people that own trees is make informed decisions before we cut anything. And we want to do the best thing that is for the tree, period.
So biologically speaking, a tree, let's say in somebody's front yard in an urban condition, when would you prune it for the first time, and then how often after that would you prune it?
Well, once it's its first, let's say, whether it's a container tree or a field-grown bald and burlap tree, you're going to give it at least 3 to 4 or 5 years before it really starts growing, because the roots are going to go out and they're going to really take off, and then you're going to see a period of it's going to take off like crazy. So it's best to leave it alone. I mean, going back to that, if you can't walk underneath it or for whatever reason, you can clip those branches off that are hitting you in the face, of course. If you see deadwood in the tree, it's always beneficial to remove it, but I'm more of a less is better type approach to all pruning.
So it's probably better for the tree to prune it less often than more often.
Exactly.
For the tree's health.
Yeah, you're going to encourage trunk taper. You're going to get a nice fat trunk as opposed to this skinny, so it is best just to leave it be and be minimalistic about it.
Now, I know a lot of people, we're prone to hurricanes in Central Florida, and I've noticed some knee-jerk reactions. Like when we had some large hurricanes and a lot of trees come down, people instinctively just cut every tree that they have. Either they cut them down or they prune them severely. And I know that there are different tree species that you prune differently. For instance, like a longleaf pine with the taproot doesn't need to be hurricane pruned because your house will come down before that tree will come down. It's very sturdy. Versus a sand pine, which has a very shallow root system, and conversely, like a laurel oak has a very short lifespan compared to a live oak. And live oaks, you really don't need to severely hurricane cut because they're very sturdy, whereas laurel oaks, you may want to do some preemptive pruning for hurricanes, but not all species need to be pruned back all the time.
Well, it all depends on the species and structurally how it's put together. You have to identify codominant stems with bark inclusions. The older the tree is, the less bigger limbs we want to take off at any given 3 to 5 year interval. We want to let it recover. Trees are unique in their own right because they're one of the only things on earth that have to grow until they die, which is sort of weird when you say it that way, but animals and humans heal. When we talk about trees, that's a poor terminology. Trees do not heal. So when we have a cut, wound, scrape, we can grow new skin, new cells develop, whatnot. Trees wall that off with 4 barrier walls. So when you take off large branches on trees, and I don't care what species it is, number one, you're taking away the food making ability of the tree. The leaves are the food factories of the tree. They produce starches and sugars which are stored in the roots. When the tree gets hungry, hey, send me up some food. And it goes back and forth all day long. So when you get aggressive on a tree for whatever reason, and now we are going back to why are trees pruned? For man's benefit or the tree's benefit?
Right.
it's typically we want to reduce rather than remove when we do this big pre-hurricane pruning. A lot of guys new to the industry, and some people are still in the industry, tend to over prune, over thin, and lion tail the trees. They get in it and it looks like they push all the growth out at the ends. So now what's happening is the branches are getting longer and longer. And what happens with branch attachments that are very poor, codominant stems, if we don't have rain for 3 or 4 weeks, and then we have a deluge, and then it'll be a very calm day a few days later, we'll have limb failures all over the city. And it's like you pick up a gallon of water, it's like 8 pounds. All that tissue sucks up all that water. And a bird or a butterfly could land in the end, and that'll be the straw that breaks its back. So when we talk about different species of trees and different requirements, each tree is special and unique in its own right. And we want to address, first, we want to identify potential problems, and we want to try to alleviate stress at failure points. If we had 2 pails of water here, and you get to hold one out like this, but I get to hold it out like this, who's going to win the contest? Who's going to be able to? It's the same with the thing with the trees. We bring them in a little bit, crown reduction, because we're recognizing that there is a codominant stem. There is a potential failure. There's a weak point in the system.
So in other words, structurally, you prune the trees to make it stronger and not prune out the entire interior of the tree for hurricane cutting. You selectively do
reduce
it very
crown
slightly.
reduction. Crown reduction in the right instance. The crown reduction is much different than topping trees.
Yeah.
Topping trees is bad practice because.
And topping tree means you literally go horizontal cut and take the top of the tree off. And I've heard that tree will never grow into its mature natural tree form because if you've done that, and it's better to kind of selectively prune.
There's a few reasons why, and without going into specific details, but when you make a topping cut on any tree, they what happens is a couple things. Is when you make that stub cut, new branches will form. But I say it's epicormic growth, and it's not true branch attachment. You can walk up to a sucker and yank it right off. So when you make that cut, this tissue here is not going to close. You're going to have decay here, and you're going to have poorly attached, vigorous growing, epicormic growth, sucker growth, attached to decaying wood, which is a recipe for failure to begin with. Not to mention, some folks tend to cut the tree in half. You're reducing the food making ability. So if you're not killing the tree, you're in effect shortening its lifespan.
So we've learned that it's bad for the tree, it's not healthy for the tree to over prune, and we really have to selectively determine when we prune and how we prune. And
you want to ascertain the tree's specific needs. When you show up and say when you were young, you bought this home, you planted this little tree, and it goes down to the right tree, right location, all that. You may have looked gorgeous in between them 2 homes, but now it's an issue because it's lifting up the slabs and whatnot, and there's cracks in the foundation. Had you just planted the tree out in the front yard, everything would be fine. So it goes down to location, species of trees. When we mentioned, it's a big difference between laurel oaks and live oaks. Live oaks will outlive your grandchildren's grandchildren, whereas a laurel oak is a short-lived tree in the big picture.
So you may have to prune the laurel oak if the branches.
Well, you're going to identify the reasons why. What is our goals? Why do we want to even cut anything off, okay?
And beware of those companies that come to your house and say, oh, your trees look like they need to be pruned, because some companies, really don't care about the biology of the tree and when it should be pruned. They just want you to prune your trees for the heck of it. And we have to really make sure that you're hiring a certified arborist, and you can, that with the proper insurance, and you can check to see if they're a certified arborist and know about the tree biology and the proper times to prune by contacting the International Society of Arboriculture.
Yes, and their ISA certification number should be either on their business card or whatnot, and it's easily checked.
Okay.
Same thing, the state of Florida has a website you can check to see if they have workman's compensation.
Excellent.
Which is also very, very important.
Excellent. And now, can you describe when a tree branch is cut at the proper time, every 3 to 5 years or so, what happens to the tree when you prune that branch off?
Well, a proper pruning cut, you know, it will encapsulate, and there's 4 barrier cell walls, and trees are cool in their own right because they will wall that off and they will encapsulate it. If you've ever looked at a 2x4 and you see the little knots in there, all that is encapsulated branch connections to where they grew over it. Some trees are really good at it. Some trees are very poor. Live oaks, you can get away with, say if for whatever reason you bought a beautiful wooded lot and you're going to build a house. Unfortunately, there's 2 or 3 limbs that are growing into the new garage and they have to be taken back. You can get away with cutting them off back to the man trunk. On a live oak, chances are they're going to close. They're going to disappear over a period of time. Whereas you take a laurel
When you
oak,
say close, that means the tree growing over where
Yeah.
the pruning cut was.
yeah, the 4 barrier cell walls will form calluses and grow completely over it, and in time it will disappear. Whereas laurel oaks, they're a shorter lived tree, and when you get aggressive on them, chances are it requires a huge amount of energy for that wound to close. So, for instance, you bought the lot, you have this gorgeous laurel oak, although it's not the greatest species of tree, it's still a nice tree. It's got good shape, good form, but we have to remove some limbs so you can grow, you can build your home. So it's better to reduce that limb rather than remove it. The smaller the cut, the more apt that limb is going to close. When we have a big limb like this on a laurel oak, chances are it won't, because it's...
And that contributes to decay of the tree.
Absolutely. We're taking one apparent problem that we're worried about the limb falling on the house, or for whatever reason, the limb is blocking the view of the sign. We're going to cut the limb off. When at all possible, you'd rather reduce it rather than to go back and remove it. The smaller the cut, the more apt it is to close.
Okay. So prune wisely.
Yeah,
and
think about it a little bit.
Think about it. Don't prune trees just for the sake of pruning them. Make sure your certified arborist is giving you the reasons why you need to prune, and only do it every 3 to 5 years at a very minimum. Typically, some live oaks can go 10 to 20 years without needing any pruning. So as part of the Native Plant Society, I've learned that our state tree, which is the native sable palm, is having some troubles right now with some diseases and stuff. Can you elaborate on that?
It's actually a bacteria. It's phytoplasma, and it's hard to identify because it often gets confused with trees that were over pruned or over fertilized, or they were moved from a dry area to a wet area. And you'll get pencil necking, and you'll get the exact same symptoms. So the only true way to identify it is to get some culture from the dead tree and take it down to your local ag extension.
So does this bacteria spread from tree
Absolutely,
to tree?
absolutely. We could probably have some on our shoes right now. It's very opportunistic.
So it's important to clean your pruning equipment if you're
Absolutely.
pruning palms from palm to palm.
And if you have one that is truly was killed from this particular bacterium, you want to remove the adjacent trees as well as a preventative measure. So it's a stitch in time, saves nine.
It's really sad what's happening. And also, I've heard what contributes to it is over pruning of our sable palmettos, which is a constant problem throughout Florida. We have companies, landscape maintenance companies, that prune our native palms, so only there's like 3 to 5 green fronds at the top, and really the proper technique is for our native palm trees is to have a full head at all times, including about 10 to 15 to 18 dead fronds, because that's how the palm tree uptakes potassium and other. So it's a healthy palm tree if it has some brown fronds in it, and the over pruning makes it susceptible to disease.
Absolutely. Palms are, the plant kingdom is divided into 2 groups, the monocots and the diocots, okay? The diocots are your woody trees, cambium, xylem, phloem, okay? And the monocots are your grasses. Palms are nothing but bundles of vascular fibers.
Like palm trees, yeah.
With one growing point. So if you look at your face on a clock, you got 9 and 3, 10 and 2, 11 and 1, and noon. So it's best. Like, we're going back to the original initial statement we made that trees are trimmed for man's benefit. This is purely, I feel, a cosmetic thing. palms don't really need to be trimmed.
And they don't really want to be trimmed.
Absolutely
It's not
not.
healthy for them to be trimmed. So, and if you do trim them, make sure you leave a full head on there.
Don't typically cut your brown ones, but even if they're yellow and they're not dead yet, they are still contributing food to the tree.
To the health of the tree. Yeah.
So 9 and 3 is the standard, and going above that.
Keep the palm tree, the head of the palm tree
9 and 3
at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock.
Yes. Anything more than that I feel is detrimental. However, it's hard to change and get anybody to do a paradigm shift in thinking when it comes to this approach.
Yeah.
A lot of managers, they see it done in other places and they think that is the correct way.
They think they need to crop it all the way up to the top.
Forgive them, for they do not know what they do. So.
Well, you heard it from the expert here. Proper palm tree pruning contributes to the health of the tree and helps it ward off the bacteria that may be spreading around.
Well, a healthy, strong tree with enough fronds can fight off infection, and it's strong. If you drive around town, and I think we can touch on the pencil necking. Pencil necking is when you sharpen a pencil and it looks like a beaver went around. It gets thick. When you drive around town, you can actually see a palm tree's history from when it was planted from the tree farm. In the tree farm, they don't prune them because they just don't. They keep them fat, happy, and fertilized. Nice fat trunk. Then it is introduced into the new world. New home, they plant it quickly and then they fail to maintain it. And here comes the landscapers every year and they over prune it. So the nice fat happy trunk over a few years gets skinny. Property management may change hands and they may not touch the tree for a few years and then it gets back fat happy again. So we got this, and you can see the pruning history just by looking at the trunk. That, okay, this is when it was introduced. This is when
they
somebody
did poor pruning techniques,
exactly.
And then this is when the years when they did the good pruning.
Exactly, and you can just tell the history by glancing at the trunk, which is it's unfortunate that it comes down to money, it comes down to aesthetics, and people want everything to look like Disney World.
Yeah. Well, in Florida, we have the National Arbor Day, which is in April every year. But in Florida, we have the third Friday of every January is Florida Arbor Day. And so the Native Plant Society, we like to educate on tree biology and the importance of trees and different species for biodiversity. And sometimes we go into schools and teach that to children. So happy Florida Arbor Day, everybody.
Right. Well, we don't have any questions in the chat, so I guess thank you so much for coming, everyone, and thank you, Karina. And stay tuned for some announcements of perhaps some in-person events.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.